Coming up on Focus, Black Oklahoma. Social justice organizations across the state are being challenged by new legislation that they believe impedes their rights to assemble peacefully. The future of evictions in Oklahoma and the recent extension of the federal eviction moratorium. We learn more about the new Medicaid expansion in Oklahoma and the people who stand to benefit most from this policy. Hear how Black cowboys and cowgirls celebrate tradition and culture for Juneteenth. Explore the intersections and systems of community care through motherhood in Black and Indigenous communities. Dive into the labor of staying accurate when putting Native cultures on screen. The fight for reparations continues as we follow a state representative who's fighting for what the Black community is owed. The lasting impacts of forever chemicals on Oklahoma fracking sites and how we can recover from their effects. All of this and more on Focus, Black Oklahoma.
Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by the Black Church Traditions and African American Faith Life program at Phillips Seminary, with an online art showcase of a sacred commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Online at wherefaithleads.com/art.
This is Focus Black Oklahoma. I'm Colby Webster.
And I'm Kuma Roberts. Racial justice advocates are under attack with House Bill 1674 that has recently made its way to Governor Stitt. The bill protects Oklahoma drivers who find themselves in the midst of those exercising their freedom to peacefully assemble. Shalandra Harrison has the story.
The 2021 Oklahoma legislative session had its share of attention-grabbing bills. House Bill 1674 is one of those bills. It is one that many followed as it made its way to the governor's desk. This bill has organizations who engage in social justice work concerned about their ability to take to the streets and peacefully assemble. Because of that concern, a petition to put this bill on the ballot was filed. If enough signatures are gathered, Oklahomans will be able to decide whether or not this should be a law in the state by voting on State Question 816. Joshua Harris Till is a community advocate and activist based in Oklahoma City. He is also the one who filed the petition and is leading no on State Question 816. I asked him what House Bill 1674 says.
House Bill 1674 has three different components. The first part of it states that there are restrictions on where you can protest in terms of how it affects traffic patterns. They use the term unreasonably inconvenient. They don't actually provide a definition for that, so I don't know what that threshold means, if it's one car, if it's several cars, but they don't want you protesting in roadways anymore. You can only go to the allotted sections, which is problematic in and of itself, right? We have the First Amendment right to peacefully assemble. We should be able to do that wherever there's public property. The second part of it, it legalizes running over protesters by frameworking it around removing civil and criminal liability as long as you fear for your life or your property. The third part of it says that if you conspire with a rioter, your organization can be legally liable.
Senator Rob Standridge from Norman proposed the legislation along with Representative Kevin West from Moore. Both are Republicans. In April, Standridge was quoted in the Oklahoman saying, quote, "We actually saw this happen here in Oklahoma last year when a Tulsa family was surrounded by rioters. Through no fault of their own, they were caught in a dangerous situation and fearing for their lives, they were attempting to get away. The prosecutor declined to file charges, but that may not always be the case. This bill will protect innocent people trapped by a rioting mob," end quote. Representative Jason Lowe is a Democrat from Oklahoma City and is the chair of the Oklahoma Legislative Black Caucus. He voted against the bill.
Governor Stitt signed House Bill 1674. As a state legislator, I voted no because I believe this bill is in direct response to Black Lives Matter protest and would have a chilling effect on free speech in the state of Oklahoma.
I asked Joshua why this issue was so important to him. He told me about his personal experience last summer.
I found it because I was out there at the protest, and I've been to a number of protests, and I'm usually at the forefront of these, or an organizer around them, or a peacekeeper in the midst. And there was one moment in particular where there was a car who had pulled up to the intersection. There were probably about 300, 400 people in the intersection at this time. Protesters were yelling at them, telling them to turn around. They weren't listening. I go up, I tell the protesters to get back in the intersection. I ask the car to turn around, and he just stares at me. And I'm like, what's the problem? You can't go this way. This intersection is full of people. You have to turn around. Like, what are you doing? And he starts to grip his steering wheel.
Joshua says the hate that exists in people's hearts makes this law dangerous. No on State Question 816 is a statewide initiative. Joshua said 59,320 signatures are needed.
But we need to get 100,000 signatures because I expect they will throw out 40,000. But if they throw out 40,000 signatures, almost half, and we have 100,000, then we'll still meet our threshold and be able to get this on the ballot.
Because any registered voter in Oklahoma is eligible to sign, there are locations across the state for those who are looking for an opportunity to add their name.
KnowOn816.com, there's a tab that says where to sign. Click that tab, find a place near you. We're adding locations all the time of places where you can pick up petitions and where you can make sure your signature is added. And don't just sign yourself, make sure everybody that you know signs as well. We have to work together in order to be successful at this.
The deadline for the collection of signatures is August 26th. Joshua is hopeful that the measure will be either on the primary ballot in June 2022 or the general ballot in November 2022. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Shalandra Harrison in Oklahoma City.
After the federal eviction moratorium expired on July 31st, President Biden reinstated it 3 days later. The new measure, in place until October 3rd, could save millions from homelessness. But in Oklahoma, where landlords evicted thousands under the previous moratorium, shelter is hardly guaranteed. Peyton Williams has more.
Homelessness is a very visible issue in Lawton, Oklahoma. In much the same way it's visible in cities like Tulsa and Oklahoma City. But where those cities have metropolitan populations that number over 500,000 people and have the city budgets and resources to match, Lawton is a small city with a population of 97,000 people and has far fewer resources to assist a growing homeless population. Lawton has a limited shelter capacity. There are only 5 emergency shelters in the city in regular operation, and of those, only 2, the C. Carter Crane Emergency Homeless Shelter and the Salvation Army Shelter, can provide beds for single homeless adults in the city. The other 3 are women's, youth, and family shelters. Even with those more specialized shelters taken into account, the number of available beds fluctuates between 80 and 120 depending on time of year, serving a homeless population that, at last count, numbered at least 200 people. And according to Jennifer Hoke, the donations specialist and spokesperson for the C. Carter Crane Center for Empowerment and Advancement, that number has increased dramatically in recent months due to the lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Everything is opening back up, but people are still without jobs or stuff, and people are running out of the unemployment benefits that they did get, so now they've got no income, no funding. So we see more people that are needing help with rent. There are more people with eviction notices and that are on that cusp of becoming homeless or have become homeless because of this situation.
While the COVID-19 pandemic has driven up the number of homeless citizens in Lawton, it has also adversely affected the amount of food available to them. The Lawton Food Bank, which is a primary source of food for Lawton's homeless and struggling citizens, had to dramatically limit its hours of operation and now serves the community on a largely by-appointment basis. Deborah Johnson, the Community Engagement and Health Planning Manager for the Oklahoma Health Department, explained the difficult situation affecting Lawton citizens experiencing homelessness.
Well, it absolutely did create barriers for people. When someone is in need, they don't always have the time or resources, to come back and plan that they're going to have to return to be able to receive that assistance.
The constraints the pandemic put on food availability were also strongly felt in Lawton's feeding ministries. One in particular, the Hungry Hearts Feeding Ministry, had come close to closing its doors before the pandemic started, according to its founder, Adrienne Davis.
It was taking too much toll on my body. Even though we had volunteers, those volunteers had jobs. So the times for pickups and drop-offs was not always convenient. So most of the time it ended up being me and a couple of other individuals. We're going to close. We're going to close the doors. We're going to have to close the doors because I can't do this anymore.
Davis's decision to close the doors was short-lived, however, as only a few days later she was offered a chance to move her organization to a permanent location, a process which started, as it would turn out, at a very inopportune time.
Probably about 3 days later, received a phone call about this building saying, don't you think it's time for Hungry Hearts to have a home? And then the pandemic hit. So it's been like 2 years, and it just seemed like when we took one step forward, we got not 2 steps back, but 5 steps back.
After nearly a year of preparation and setbacks, Hungry Hearts began operating again on July 6th and will be offering meals 3 times a week. The ministry regularly fed more than 100 people at a time before the pandemic, and Davis hopes to get it back up to that number by the end of July. While the community organizations and feeding ministries help to combat the problems faced by the homeless in Lawton, they would be able to do far more with more funding and more recognition from city government and community leaders. Jennifer Hoke emphasized the need for community leaders to visit community organizations such as the C. Carter Crane Shelter to develop a better understanding of the challenges they face.
It's like, okay, they may give us, funding and stuff, but do they really understand how we're using this funding, why we need this funding, why we ask for so much funding if they don't come out and see what's going on?
For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Peyton Williams in Lawton.
Over 200,000 Oklahomans are eligible for Medicaid as new requirements take effect. Oklahoma joins 39 other states in expanding Medicaid after years of resistance. The program, which has narrowly served mostly children, senior citizens, and the disabled, can now serve low-income adults. Catherine Sweeney has the story.
July 1st is going to go down in history because Oklahoma becomes the 39th state now to join its colleague states in expanding access to peace of mind.
Yes. That's Javier Becerra, the U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary. He came to Tulsa that day to commemorate the state's expanded Medicaid program. Benefits went into effect for those new members 2 weeks ago. It's been a long time coming. Advocates for expansion have urged officials to open the program to more low-income adults for more than a decade. Voters forced their hand last summer when they approved State Question 802 and placed the policy in the state's constitution. That means the legislature can't reverse it.
I could actually go see a doctor now. I've been in pain for over 5 years. Not being able to see the doctor was terrible. Now I can see a doctor and I can get my teeth fixed. I can go get my glasses. Finally, after all this time, I'm going to get help, and I am thankful. Everybody else should get this too, so they can be helped just like me.
That's Gail. She's one of several people who weighed in during the Oklahoma Policy Institute's recent Countdown to Care event. The progressive think tank is based in Tulsa and has been one of Medicaid expansion's top proponents for nearly a decade. Medicaid is a program that uses state and federal funds to cover health insurance. Traditional Medicaid is open to a pretty narrow section of the population, mostly children, then seniors and disabled people. Under the Affordable Care Act, states had the option to open that service to more low-income adults. Under traditional Medicaid, young adults would have to either be pregnant or caretakers to qualify, and caretakers had to earn less than $400 a month. Now, workers in single households can earn up to $27,000 a year, and a family of 4 about $56,000 a year, and still qualify. Enrollment opened in June, and benefits went into effect in July. State officials estimate about 200,000 Oklahomans now qualify for services since the program expanded. A spokeswoman for the state's Medicaid agency, the Oklahoma Health Care Authority, says they're not quite there yet. Here's Caitlin Burns.
We currently have more than 133,000 individuals who have been approved for benefits through expansion since June 1.
She says a majority of people who have already enrolled are women, nearly 2/3. The age ranges are pretty evenly distributed, and so are urban and rural members. Although benefits kicked off on July 1st, enrollment didn't close. Oklahomans can still apply online or over the phone. For years, Oklahoma has ranked second to last in the nation for its insured rate. Only Texas had a higher share of people without health insurance. That's changing. Here's Secretary Becerra.
For the more than 500,000 Oklahomans who still have no insurance, there's some good news because close to 200,000 of you will now have access to it as a result of your vote and the Medicaid expansion that starts today.
There's still work to do. About 65,000 Oklahomans who qualify for Medicaid expansion haven't enrolled. New members will have to learn how to use their benefits. All the while, the state's executive branch is still working on its plan to bring in private insurance companies to administer Medicaid. That plan was nearly finalized, and 4 companies were given the contracts for $2 billion in Medicaid spending. But then the state Supreme Court ruled the program didn't have proper legislative approval. Governor Kevin Stitt and his administration say they will continue their efforts to bring managed care through private insurance companies to Oklahoma. For State Impact, I'm Catherine Sweeney.
Now some headlines from across the state.
More than 5,000 students received a welcome gift as Tulsa Community College recently used federal funds to erase outstanding balances. Data from a recent survey of students showed that many were suffering financial hardship as a result of the pandemic, and removing this barrier will help more students continue their path to complete a degree.
On August 1st, the U.S. men's national team defeated Mexico 1-0 to win the 2021 CONCACAF Gold Cup. The U.S. MNT also beat Mexico 3-2 in June's Nations League final. Those 2 wins marked the U.S. MNT's first over Mexico in a final since 2007. The U.S. MNT and Edmond, Oklahoma native Daryl DK helped the U.S. team achieve at the highest levels. He has drawn significant interest from Premier League teams like Manchester and Chelsea. The 21-year-old striker hit 9 goals over his 22 appearances during his last season.
The Oklahoma film industry has a few notable projects coming to light this month. Killers of the Flower Moon continues its production in the state, with stars and crew filming in downtown Tulsa on Sunday, August 8th. Extras in period garb, antique cars, along with Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Jesse Plemons, were all spotted at the federal court building, as well as the Phil Tower, with streets blocked off to onlookers and photographers looking to catch scenes on the set. The film tells the story of an FBI detective who investigates the murders of Osage tribal members at the hands of white individuals looking to systematically marry into and steal the wealth of the Osage people.
On August 9th, local Indigenous filmmaker Sterling Harjo premiered his new television series, Reservation Dogs, on FX. The series was co-created with fellow Indigenous filmmaker Taika Waititi of Thor Ragnarok fame. The series features an all-Indigenous cast and crew and was filmed throughout Oklahoma in Okmulgee, Tulsa, Sand Springs, Beggs, Inola, and Tarleton. Upon release, Reservation Dogs has received near universal acclaim, with critics and audiences noting the series' upheaval of stereotypes in the Native community and setting a new range for Native American representation in media.
On July 30th, the film Stillwater, starring Matt Damon, was released internationally. The film was shot in Oklahoma and tells the story of an unemployed oil rig worker from rural Oklahoma whose daughter is convicted of murder during an exchange student trip abroad. The film is loosely based on the real-life events of Amanda Knox, who similarly was convicted of murder as a student during a trip to Italy. Knox recently spoke out against the film for how it portrays her as guilty for a conviction she was acquitted of in real life.
The U.S. Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police Departments in D.C. will receive medals of honor for protecting Congress during the January 6th insurrection. The legislation has been sent to President Biden for his signature. Under the bill, which passed with no objections, there will be 4 medals to be displayed at the Capitol Police Headquarters, the Metropolitan Police Department, the U.S. Capitol, and the Smithsonian Institution.
This year, Black Women's Equal Pay Day fell on August 3rd because it takes the average Black woman working full-time 1 year and 8 months to earn the same as an average white non-Hispanic man earns in 1 year. Black women are paid 63 cents for every dollar a white man earns.
With a new school year starting in a few days and COVID cases spiking dangerously in Oklahoma, Governor Stitt has not changed his position on the prohibition placed on local school districts from requiring masks. Senate Bill 658, signed into law last month by Governor Kevin Stitt, prohibits a district from implementing mask mandates or vaccine requirements without a state of emergency being declared by the governor.
In response, House Democrats have filed legislation to reverse Senate Bill 658, which prevents school boards from implementing life-saving COVID protection measures. The Safe at School Act, House Bill 2967, authored by Representative Melissa Provenzano, Democrat of Tulsa, would restore local control for communities across Oklahoma by repealing parts of Senate Bill 658.
After a 5-month investigation, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York has resigned amidst allegations of sexual harassment and inappropriate conduct from a number of women, including former staffers and one current staffer. New York State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins will leave her post to become the first Black acting lieutenant governor once the current lieutenant governor, Kathy Hochul, assumes her new leadership position in Albany. This will be the first time the Empire State will have 2 women at the helm.
Tulsa Mayor G.T. Bynum has announced Cassia Carr as Tulsa's next deputy mayor. Tulsa's deputy mayor serves as the acting mayor in the mayor's absence and coordinates policy matters on behalf of the city of Tulsa. Carr will oversee the administrative division of city departments, including municipal courts, human resources, IT, and customer care. She will also work with Deputy Chief of Staff Rodrigo Rojas in coordinating the ongoing 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Graves investigation. Carr previously served as an attorney for Williams Companies, focusing on contracts, real estate, and supply chain. She holds a Juris Doctorate from the University of Tulsa and a Bachelor of Science in International Business and Spanish from ORU, in which she is fluent. She is also an opera singer and a member and trustee at Southminster Presbyterian Church.
You're listening to Focus Black Oklahoma.
2 months after the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial, one state representative is still fighting for reparations. She faces no shortage of obstacles, but also might have some unlikely allies. Garrett Yelch has details.
In 2001, the state of Oklahoma convened a commission to study the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. The bipartisan commission released a report recommending various forms of reparations be paid. This included direct payments to descendants from the state of Oklahoma because of the Oklahoma National Guard's complicity in the massacre and state officials' obstruction of efforts to revitalize Greenwood in the aftermath. But since then, these recommendations have mostly been ignored. Frustrated by this inaction, State Representative Regina Goodwin, a Democrat from North Tulsa, proposed an interim study in June aimed at addressing these recommendations.
First of all, I wanted to ask why the Oklahoma State Legislature has not done much as related to the 2001 report. Out of that report, 200-page report, they recommended reparations. They were very specific. And saying some 20 years later that we've not made much progress, it was, how do we look at reparations? What remedies can we provide? And let's have that conversation. Let's have some concrete action.
Goodwin observes that other cities like Evanston, Illinois, have passed direct payment reparations for slavery, but neither the state nor the city have done the equivalent for the Tulsa Race Massacre, despite their direct complicity.
Tulsa should be at least in the discussion, and beyond the discussion, Tulsa should be the focal point for how do you get reparations done.
But her study was recently denied by Speaker of the House Charles McCall, a Republican from Atoka. This was somewhat unexpected, as only 12% of the proposals were denied.
I did reach out to him 2 weeks prior to have conversation. Had no feedback. I wrote him, I called him, no feedback.
After not responding to Goodwin, McCall released this statement to the media, quote, "Studying a previous state study on a matter now with the courts in active litigation is duplicative. Many existing studies on the topic are widely available for review," unquote. But Goodwin says this criticism is unfounded.
I don't know of a study that is asking why the legislature, the state, has not moved in a more demonstrated fashion on the recommendations. And he said it had already been studied. And then he mentioned that there was litigation happening, which I don't know what that has to do with recommendations that were some 20 years old.
And, despite this litigation, the Tulsa Reconciliation Scholarship was founded in 2003 from the recommendations of the report and is still active today. So, because of this precedent, Goodwin doesn't see why the other recommendations couldn't be pursued. Speaker McCall declined to respond to Goodwin's criticism. Phil Armstrong, the director of Greenwood Rising, says that much of Republicans' unwillingness to even discuss reparations comes from the partisan association with the word reparations itself.
It's a divisive word because the stereotype is reparations means vis-a-vis a check given to somebody. And number one, Republican conservative values are smaller government, not using the government to aid social programs. That should be something that private and donors and foundations should do. So just on their premise of what it means to be a fiduciary conservative, they don't believe in reparations.
For example, Representative J.J. Humphrey, a Republican from Lane, told me he doesn't support reparations.
I do not support giving any more than what's been given. Now, would I do things to help? Absolutely. But again, it wouldn't be across racial divide.
Humphrey instead supports investing in infrastructure and education in poor communities, which would disproportionately help people of color. Armstrong notes that many non-monetary reparations projects, similar to what Humphrey referenced, have been implemented in Tulsa.
So you have the city of Tulsa that developed a brand new economic development office this year that's going to spend millions of dollars to revitalization economic programs in specifically North Tulsa.
The city will also soon release its master plan for the redevelopment of the land it owns in North Tulsa. Additionally, one of Goodwin's approved interim studies will inquire into removing I-244, the highway built over Greenwood in the 70s.
It cut through the heart of our community. And now there's a great conversation on how that gets removed and how that gets redeveloped.
Those are reparation discussions. Now, is it writing a check to a specific person? No. If that is your only focus of reparations, then no, nothing's ever going to satisfy you unless somebody gets a check. But if your view is reparations is that and all of these things that I'm describing, then you are going to be a very happy person to see what takes place within the next several months and the next several years in terms of a reparations mindset towards Greenwood and the North Tulsa community.
But Goodwin says these positive developments don't obscure the fact that the government still hasn't acted much on the 2001 report. So despite her study's denial, she still plans to keep pushing forward.
What I plan to do is have a conversation, not necessarily an interim study, but certainly to bring minds together that can pretty much do what we were going to do in the interim study. It just won't be with the blessings of Speaker McCall.
For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Garrett Yelch in Tulsa.
Last month, Physicians for Social Responsibility published a report showing that the EPA approved toxic forever chemicals for fracking in 2011. Since then, the chemicals have been used at over 1,200 fracking sites in 6 states, including more than 50 in Oklahoma. Nick Alexandrov has more.
They're already in your blood. And not just yours, your neighbors, your coworkers, your relatives out in Denver or back in New England. It really doesn't matter where. Most people in the U.S. have already been exposed. I'm talking about per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, better known, mercifully, by the acronym PFAS or PFAS.
PFAS or forever chemicals are extraordinarily toxic.
Dusty Horwit is an attorney and researcher based in Lansing, Michigan. He told me PFAS earned their forever moniker because
they are resistant to breaking down in the environment. That's because of the way they're manufactured, which creates a bond between carbon and fluorine atoms, one of the strongest bonds known in chemistry.
And they're harmful in extremely small quantities.
1 measuring cup of PFOA,
or fluorooctanoic acid,
the most infamous of the forever chemicals, could contaminate about 8 billion gallons of water to an unsafe level. That's about the amount of water that New York City uses over the course of 6 days.
If you were exposed to that water, you could expect
irritation to skin and lungs, liver toxicity, blood toxicity, neurotoxicity,
and tumor formation, to list the Environmental Protection Agency's PFAS-related concerns. But these fears did not stop the EPA in 2011 from approving 3 PFAS or potentially PFAS chemicals for hydraulic fracturing. Dusty details this approval in Fracking with Forever Chemicals, a report published last month by Physicians for Social Responsibility. He explains how he used Frack Focus, an online database, to search for the substance greenlit by the EPA.
We didn't find that particular chemical, but we did find 6 other chemicals that had similar names. And we ran those chemical names by 4 different chemistry experts and health experts. And they told us that these chemicals were either PFAS or they could be chemicals that could break down into PFAS in oil and gas operations. And we found that they were used in more than 1,200 wells in 6 different states, including in Oklahoma.
Our state has over 50 of these sites, mainly in McLean and Carter counties. At all of them, the same potential PFAS chemical, non-ionic fluorosurfactant, was used between 2013 and 2020. The Oklahoma City-based Charter Oak Production Company, for example, injected that chemical at 19 sites in the 2 counties. The company did not respond to my email requesting more information, so I shifted my focus. Charter Oak, like every firm that fracks in Oklahoma, is required by the state's Corporation Commission to submit to Frack Focus a list of the chemicals it uses. Those lists name the chemical suppliers, and at all the Charter Oak sites that name was the same, Chemplex. The company, in an email, explained that Chemplex is an affiliate of Solvay USA Incorporated, a subsidiary of the Belgian chemical multinational Solvay SA. Chemplex further explained that until 2019, a few of its products, quote, were blended with less than 1% of a PFAS-containing raw material manufactured by others, unquote. But because fracking operators can blast millions of pounds of fluid into the earth, and because PFAS is toxic even in small quantities, and because PFAS could contaminate water sources during leaks or spills at fracking sites, Chemplex's figure, the less than 1%, is less than reassuring. And there are other contexts at play here. Consider the Carter County cluster of fracking sites in Tatums, one of Oklahoma's few surviving all-black towns. Those sites illustrate Dr. Clara Zwickel's conclusion in a 2019 study that blacks in Oklahoma, Texas, and elsewhere, quote, disproportionately live near fracking wells, unquote. To better grasp the connection between extraction and racial injustice, I contacted Tim Donaghy. He's a researcher with Greenpeace and co-author of the recent report, Fossil Fuel Racism.
Perhaps folks are more familiar with the term environmental racism and environmental justice. And I think that's generally the idea that pollution gets concentrated in communities that are more vulnerable. I would say fossil fuel racism is sort of a specific subset of that, where it's just looking at the pollution caused by our use of fossil fuels. So we're talking about oil and gas and coal primarily. And the pattern is very clear. At each stage of the fossil fuel life cycle, fossil fuels are creating pollution that's harmful to the public health, and those harms are disproportionately impacting Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor communities.
The problems identified here are immense, draining even to think about. But both the researchers I spoke to are solutions-oriented. Tim closed our conversation by cutting through the prevailing climate pessimism.
Humans need energy. We need energy to run our cars, to heat our homes, to turn on the lights. All of that can be replaced. There's technical challenges, certainly, but they're not insurmountable. We just have to make the right investments in order to do it.
And here's Dusty explaining how to curb the presence of PFAS in fracking.
We'd like to see EPA and or state governments step in and stop the use of these forever chemicals. We'd also like to see EPA and state governments identify where these chemicals are being used and where they have been used so that communities can take steps to protect themselves.
For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Nick Alexandrov in Carter County.
Black cowgirls and cowboys recently enjoyed a long-time local event centered on food, horses, and love of cherished culture and tradition. Here's Jamie Glisson with the story.
For rodeo fans, we're going to bring a young man out into the arena. He's going to sing our Black national anthem. We got a young lady, Amanda, who's going to sing our national anthem, and we're going to be ready to go with the rodeo. So if you don't mind, Jay Friday is coming out to sing our Black national anthem. Would you please stand?
Sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the leaves skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of that the past has taught us. Sing a song full of the faith that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
For the past 26 years, the Juneteenth Rodeo in Owasso, Oklahoma, has attracted cowboys and cowgirls as young as 3 years old. This family fun event has on average 500 to 600 contestants participating from 8 different states. The event kicks off with a parade of all the participants on horseback circling the arena, while Chocolate City by the funk band Parliament blares from the speakers. In between events, Darian Grimmett of Tulsa, one of the many concession vendors serving delicious local delicacies, discussed her experiences at the rodeo.
So I've been coming out here since I've literally been in Pampers. My dad has been coming out here since this thing has first started. Today we sold fried ribs, catfish, smoked hot link chicken, and we just had, beer, special drinks. Like I said, we've been doing it for a long time, so.
Earlier that day, the Bill Pickett Invitational Rodeo Showdown in Las Vegas, Nevada, aired on CBS, becoming the first Black rodeo to air on national broadcast television. Rodeo judge Rodney Demery was in Las Vegas for the monumental occasion. He shared a little Bill Pickett history and his love for the sport.
I've rodeoed all my life. I've been judging for the last 4 or 5 years. I was in Las Vegas last week. I steer wrestle there, and I also help judge. Steer wrestling was invented. Bill Pickett actually started that. He was a cowhand at 101 Ranch in Ponca City, and he had a steer that wouldn't stay with the herd, and he just ran by the steer and caught him by the horns, wrestled him to the ground, and bit him on the lip, threw him, and that's how they handled him and got him back to the herd. So that's kind of the basics of where steer wrestling came from. It's always a good feeling to be able to rodeo, and then to be able to rodeo for this purpose is wonderful. Local rodeo is a pretty good environment. It's something to kind of involve your kids in. I have 3 boys that rope calves, and I have a daughter that runs barrels. So my baby boy roped in the show, and I've got 2 boys that'll rope in the slack here momentarily.
As the evening came to a close, former bull rider Jeff Wilson of Clearview spoke about his favorite event.
Pony Express, this is a mecca. It's like a staple. If you don't come for anything else, you have to come and watch the Pony Express.
The Pony Express is a horse relay race between 2 teams of 8 highly skilled riders handing off a baton while circling the arena. A nearby spectator described the event as, quote, anxiety and amazing at the same time, end quote. This event is a crowd favorite and traditionally only done at Black rodeos. I asked Jeff what makes this rodeo so different.
Well, it's just more family-oriented and just up close and personal. Like you go to the other rodeos at like the fairgrounds and the stock shows, you have to buy a ticket, sit in your seat, you buy your hot dogs from the concession stand. But here, you get to walk around, really get to talk to the contestants. You really get to actually get up close to the animals, and it really helps you fall in love with the sport. And this is just a good chance to bring the family out, watch the young kids go. And my family, we have horses, ride horses. and we put on a rodeo every year in Clearview, Oklahoma, and that's how I fell in love with it. So I just would go with my cousin, Romeo Alford, who used to bring me out there. We would feed horses and feed calves, and I would just learn the ropes of how to put on a rodeo.
Then Jeff told me about his biggest achievement during his rodeo career.
I rode bulls. Again, you grow up riding the sheep, and then you ride the calves, and then you ride the steers. This is the only place you get to come to and learn from the bottom up. I rode for about 4 or 5 years, and I rode, the highest point that I ever rode was they're called Championship Bull Riders in Pratt, Kansas, whenever I wore my buckle.
Jeff Wilson is very proud of his buckle and wears it to every rodeo he attends. I followed up with him to inquire about the Clearview Rodeo his family started 39 years ago. The 2021 event has been canceled due to the recent death of his cousin and rodeo organizer, Romeo Alford Jr. The Juneteenth Rodeo in Owasso, Oklahoma is a must-see, action-packed, culture-filled event that's fun for the whole family. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Jamie Glisson in Owasso.
You're listening to Focus, Black Oklahoma.
Two different cultures find common ground through a shared love of caring for new mothers and connecting a treasured past to present realities. Brittany Cordera has more.
In the Black and Native communities, one will find solidarity between them in the ways that they preserve their identities and give back to their communities. For both, rematriation work is an important form of culture preservation and activism. Rematriation takes many forms, from language preservation, practicing ceremony, taking care of the land, and even birth work.
Birth work is rematriation work. And for me, rematriation is about the balance in relationships. It's about consent culture, body sovereignty, reciprocity, and recognizing the power of inclusive and ancestral knowledge systems.
This is Jasha Lyons Echohawk. They are a two-spirit mother, birth worker, graduate student, and founder of Indigenous Milk Medicine Week, which is occurring this month. She is an enrolled member of the Seminole Nation and descendant of the Pawnee, Iowa, Omaha, and Creek tribes. As a certified birth worker and student midwife, she uses her role to empower birthing people in the Native community.
So my Pawnee name means, or is pronounced Titata Chikstariku, which means she who thinks with her heart before she speaks. So a lot of this care work, a lot of the work that I do is very intentional. I have to continue to make sure that it lines up with the mind, heart, and spirit. So it is very spiritual work.
As an Indigenous birth worker, their role goes beyond just supporting mothers during this transitional experience. It's about giving birthing people the tools to have a sacred birth experience.
As a birth worker, I support traditional kinship roles and practices before, during, and after birth. And I also am learning that I hold a role to support ceremonies that will support those life givers, such as coming of age or celebration of your last menses or your last period ever. As a birth worker, I build relationships and advocate on public concern and service to the individual, to the community or the family. Birth worker, for me, an Indigenous birth worker, serves to hold space in a variety of capacities that would otherwise have trained doulas existing outside the scope of their quote-unquote birthing work.
In fact, Ziara is more than just a support system. She prepares mothers with the tools to have a healthy mind, body, and spirit. She cooks meals for her clients and teaches them about healthy nutrition.
Yeah, just teaching them how to advocate for themselves in the medical system, as well as helping people to learn how to just be healthy all around. Pregnancy is a time when a lot of people start to take a look at what they're putting into their bodies, about what they're doing with their bodies, and just take a little bit more care, because carrying new life, the mother is so sacred that she is able to do that. It's really a wonderful time to just be inspired by what's happening within one's own body and be inspired to do the things that one needs to do in life in order to cultivate wellness and health and prosperity and all good things for themselves while they're growing their babies, and also just to pass on to their children as well.
For both Jasha and Ziara, birth work for them is a way to ensure birthing people are not taken advantage of in the medical system. They both had a calling to pursue this work amidst the pandemic and political upheaval of last year.
Being a doula means a lot to me. And it started with last year when all of the protesting was going on over the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and just the outrage in the community and just the state of our community as Black people in America. So at the time, I didn't really know what to do. I wanted to be able to be there for my community in some way to change what's happening. It wasn't more than 2 weeks later that a friend of mine had made a post on Facebook just saying that we needed more Black doulas and midwives. And I knew what a midwife was, but I wasn't sure what a doula was. I had never heard of a doula before. So I did a Google search, and learning about what doulas do as advocates, as educators, as guides through the pregnancy and birth experiences and postpartum as well for some doulas, to help empower mothers, to help them have healthy and positive and sacred experiences. I just knew immediately that this is where I was being called to help.
It was way more obvious to a lot of our, world in 2020 with the uprisings, with noting, racism as a public health crisis and seeing all these folks suffering at the hands of police violence, of state violence. I felt really compelled to I've got to jump. I've got to do something that is going to be more, more of an impact, I felt. And so, when I reached out to these midwives, I was like, can I start training now? We're grounded in such a large way, and yet this work has to continue. These people are still needing to be served, and it'll take time, but with the knowledge that I'm gaining, I'm still able to be a better advocate or a stronger advocate or a more informed advocate in this birthing space and so of course they welcomed me right away. And so it's been really interesting to be on a different kind of front line during this pandemic, of getting exposed I don't know how many times before I finally got COVID.
For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Brittany Cordera in Pawnee Nation, Oklahoma.
Up next, contributor Devin Williams investigates how Native Americans are keeping the facts straight amid a new wave of Native representation in the media.
It's 1865. A family of noble pioneers is embarking on a treacherous journey into the unknown hazards of Indian territory. As the family bravely ventures through the golden fields and over the hills to their uncertain destiny, on the horizon, a terrifying silhouette of a man encroaches on horseback. Adorned with an elaborate headdress, bare chest, and a face hemorrhaging war paint, he throws his head back and unleashes a brutal blood-curdling shriek, alerting the uncivilized horde to the next group of unfortunate travelers. Undoubtedly, they will have their scalps claimed by a Comanche warlord. Thunderous rumbling can be heard from the dozens of savage tomahawk-wielding marauders on horseback. For this family, the end is nigh. Because the director has yelled cut, Rance Royakwe has spotted numerous inaccuracies. Rance is a Comanche and Four Tribes member, an assistant teaching professor and co-founder of Indian Image, a consulting company that works to ensure accurate representation of Native Americans in TV and film.
Honestly, I feel like I could be up here in the academic circles and at the university, and I could just write all day and publish. But how many people are gonna see that or hear that or read that? If you're in the academic realm, maybe you might get drift of that, but a lot of times, it takes a while for some of that stuff to bleed over into, to pop culture or whatever. So I look at what's been the main educator of Americans to this day. What really educates people in America? Well, the way people are informed nowadays is watching television, watching the screen. Whether it's they're watching a series, whether they're watching the news, whether they're watching a movie, they're soaking up all this information. And if you go back, let's say you're watching a Western or something like that, you're looking at that as, oh, that's historically accurate. That's actual history. I'm going to absorb all this stuff as actual history. And these things actually happened. Well, no, they didn't.
Rance teaches at the University of Oklahoma, where he earned his degree in Native American Studies. An avid lover of film, Rance discusses his desire to change the stereotypes about indigenous people that run rampant in the minds of Americans.
What happens when you don't present all those wide range of emotions or those wide ranges of things that happen, what humans go through, you begin to dehumanize them. You lock them in a niche, and that's just who they are. They become a stereotype. And so, to be human, to be able to try to represent characters and to bring characters to life on film and to show those human qualities, it only lends itself more to being viewed as an equal member of society.
In his academic pursuits, he finds himself galvanized to use his expertise to dispel ignorance during various productions. He tells about his time working on the AMC series, The Sun.
One time when an individual was asking, well, if she's a Comanche woman, how does she ride a horse? Does she ride it sitting on the horse with both of her legs on one side? Or does she ride it like a man? And I had to explain to them, the Comanche women rode horses like men, and that was a situation where they took that information and they went ahead and incorporated it into that scene.
Rance admits there's a balance between the educational aspects of his work and the entertainment that is expected for general audiences.
There was one situation where we were to put on this dance, kind of like a marriage kind of a situation or a courting situation. We tried to explain that with Comanche culture, there wasn't some full-blown celebration. There was a marriage, there was a ceremony, but it wasn't like there was this full-blown fantastical thing. Well, they wanted us to make it more romantic. We tried to explain to them that, that's not how really it was. Present day culture nowadays is a little bit it's not the same. It allows for these dances to go on. They wanted us to put on a certain what was called a round dance, a two-step, Indian two-step dance, and that's where you have men and women dancing together. And this is more of a modern thing than a historic thing. And so we had to try to blend that. We had to negotiate with them because they really wanted to bring this kind of romantic feel to the screen. I had to try to explain to them that Comanches weren't really that romantic.
Going forward, Rance recognizes that Indian image and popular culture have a long way to go in truly representing the numerous different native cultures that exist in America today. He believes authentic representation lies somewhere in a tension between historical accuracy and modern expectations.
I do feel like, representing historic events and instances, cultures accurately is important for those purposes of trying to correct past sensibilities. But I think, having modern representation and showing where cultures are at today is going to show just as much difference in the cultures as they would have in the past. So I think it's, I think showing an actual representation shows that, people are still living this culture.
For Focus Black, Oklahoma, I'm Devin Williams in Norman.
Focus Black Oklahoma is produced in partnership with KOSU Radio, Tulsa Artist Fellowship, and Tri-City Collective. Our theme music is by Moffett Music. Our contributing music artist on this broadcast is Karen Dalton. Focus Black Oklahoma's executive producers are Quraish Ali Lansana and Bracken Clark. Our associate producers are Nick Alexandrov and Vanessa Gaona. Visit us online at kosu.org, tricitycollective.com/Focus Black Oklahoma. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Focus Black OK. You can hear Focus Black Oklahoma on demand for free at kosu.org. FBO is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, NPR One, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please download and subscribe.
Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by the Black Church Traditions and African American Faith Life program at Phillips Seminary, with an online art showcase of a sacred commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Online at wherefaithleads.com/art.